Alô. Pessoal, boa tarde.
Good afternoon. I hope you've had some time to rest.
Could eat well, have a good lunch, and rest a little bit. So, next 2 hours, we have a roundtable, and just waiting one of the members to arrive, Juan-Samaniego of the University of Loja. So, I will delay 2 more minutes. He's already entering the university, so as soon as he comes, we begin. But before that, I just want to plan with you and arrange a few details for tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, we have a workshop for planning some activities related to the UI green metric. One is that we can work together and think together about a joint project. So that we start really thinking things together, exchange of students and so on. We also, the second topic for tomorrow is about the online courses. We already have 3 ongoing that are focused, or they have as target group undergrad students, but we also want to have new courses, to plan new courses. That would mean maybe other courses for undergrad, but we are also thinking how we could have new courses for technical staff of the university, to think about green, when you are buying things, for example, this is related to our technical staff. And also other things related to the management of the university. So I think we should, for tomorrow, plan something in this direction. And this would mean that we can work together as the other 3 courses we have. So we want to give the first steps for this. And so these are the 2 things we want. And the third one is related to monitoring behavior. So we are talking about improving new technologies within the university. We are talking about environmental education. But at the end, what we want is also that our community, it means our students, our technical, teaching staff and so on, that they also change behavior, more aligned to sustainability. That means people using more bikes, walking more, and other things related to the activities within the university, but also at their home and at their daily activities. And so I invited a colleague that works with these, monitoring the culture of sustainability, and something that we want also to discuss, how to bring this within our UI green metric network. So these are the 3 approaches for tomorrow morning. The meeting will not be here. So tomorrow we will meet at the building or the office where the environmental superintendence is. It's very close to here, but we are meeting there. It's a smaller room where we can chat and work better in this workshop. And also for tomorrow, a few of you are going with us to the field trip. So we schedule a field trip that we are leaving tomorrow afternoon. And we are coming back on Sunday. At the end of the day, we are coming back and taking you all to the airport directly, to the international airport. And those that want to come back to São Paulo, it's okay. So, but we are coming back after lunch on Sunday. So, but I still need the confirmation that you confirm again. Many of you said you would go, but now I need you to confirm with me so that I can count with you all, because some of you also had some changes in the schedule and won't be able to go, but I need to know who is going tomorrow. So, because we are taking you at the hotel, you have to bring already your luggage to here, because you are leaving from here directly to Ilhabela. Ilhabela is on the coast. It's 4 to 5 hours of travel. It's a nice place. We are planning a boat trip Saturday morning, so we are going out, so it's a nice place we're having lunch outside and so on. And the other day we also can do a walking on the state park with waterfalls and so on. But I need to know who is going, or at least to confirm it. So Maicon, that's on the back, see Maicon there. If you please could afterwards go and confirm with him that you are going, that would help us. We still have to confirm the boat and the things, and also we need the names, correct names and numbers for tomorrow traveling, entering the island. So there is some bureaucratic things we have to arrange. I need your help. I don't know everybody, so please let me know. You can do it afterwards, but still today, please help me with that. Juan-Samaniego has already. Okay, so I'm starting, and as soon as he arrives, then we bring him with us. So the proposal for today afternoon is that we will have a short speech from Professor Tenório. Professor Tenório is a colleague here from the School of Engineering. So he will give a kind of a overview about circularity or circular economy, and also this interface with the university. So it will be like 15 minutes. And then I will call the other colleagues to the table after the speech, and we do a talk here. So that will be Thalita, and she's from the University of Campinas. That will be Plínio. Plínio is from Ambipar. And that will be Carolina? No, sorry. Oh, Jackeline, sorry, Jackeline. Jackeline, now working at the University of Trier. This will be those that, and Juan-Samaniego from University of Loja. And then after Tenório's talk, we call everybody and we do a talk here. So I will provoke all the speakers with questions. So it's more a dialogue and discussion and a brainstorm on circular economy, what's the role of the university, what we are already doing, what we can do together, how we can improve it, which are the next challenges. These are the kind of questions we are discussing here. And this talk also will help us for planning tomorrow joint activities, joint projects, and so that we can move on. Okay? So my friend Tenório, Professor Tenório, be welcome here. And thank you again for bringing this provocation for us, all these ideas.
Boa tarde a todos e a todas.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well. My name is Jorge Tenório. I'm a professor at the School of Engineering. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to talk a little bit, a tiny bit, about circular economy and why that's relevant for our new center. I'll be speaking Portuguese because we have simultaneous translation, so it's easier for those of you who are here to understand me in Portuguese, okay? So the first thing I have to say is that I don't see very well. I see practically nothing, actually. But I can survive, thank God. I have been teaching at the School of Engineering for over 35 years, and it's never been a problem. But for larger rooms like this one, I can't really see my computer screen, so obviously I won't be able to see what's on the big screen. It's not because I'm sideways, it's just because I really can't see. So my presentations are kind of improvised. They're off the top of my head, so bear with me. I may ask Franco to read something for me. You will see Franco in a minute because Franco will be showing a few things to you during my presentation. So please bear with me. Okay, so let's start. Did I change the slide? Please let me know, Franco. Let me make sure my finger's on the right button so I can change the slides properly. So this is a map of the world, and it's changing color as the population of the world increases. And you can see in both hemispheres, so there's an animation on the left-hand side and the chart on the right-hand side showing populational growth in some of the largest cities in the world. And I'm going to try and go back. So you can see in the animation that the world is becoming darker green. So it's becoming more and more urban. And this is a classic animation in any environmental course you might attend. You know, it shows the urbanization of the world. As the world becomes more urban, the demand for materials also increases, and so does waste. So soon, it's going to be like this film from 2009, Wall-E. There won't be anywhere left for waste in the world. We're going to drown in this kind of waste. And the world is becoming more modern, so there's an increasing demand for more sophisticated materials. What do I mean by that? We used to use simpler materials like stone, then wood, then iron, then copper, then bronze. Oops, I'm sorry, his microphone stopped working, gentlemen and ladies. We can't hear him in the translation booth. Did I turn it off? See? As you can see, I can't see, so I pressed the wrong button and switched off my mic. Napoleon conquered the world because he had the iron production technology. He could produce more iron than anybody else at that time, and obviously now technology prevails even more. Everything is becoming more technological, more compact, using less power, and doing things we weren't able to do before. The processing capacity of the mobile phone in my hand is more sophisticated now than NASA's when they sent the first man to the moon. And that happens because of the embedded technology, but also because of the elements and compounds that are getting harder and harder to find. This chart shows the critical material. On the y-axis, we see the most irreplaceable materials, like tungsten. It cannot be replaced for its applications. And That's the x-axis, actually. And on the y-axis, we have the materials that are produced in very few places. And those are the so-called critical materials. So tungsten is in the second quarter in the upper quadrant. Then there's niobium. There's a lot of niobium in Brazil, but niobium is available in very few places. Rare earth materials, LED lighting, for instance, which is the prevailing type of lighting now, is based on rare earth elements. Behind this computer, for instance, this computer is backlit. It's a liquid crystal, an LCD screen that is backlit by pewter, indium copper. It's a very hard metal to find. So things are becoming better, more sophisticated, and they require harder to find materials, and materials that are less likely to be replaced. And that's what circular economy is for, so that we can repurpose all this waste. And we'll see in my presentation that these are irreplaceable, and there's more and more demand for them. So the world is huge, but it's becoming smaller and smaller. We have water issues in São Paulo and in other towns, but we also have other invisible issues impacting less noticeable things. Now, Franco's going to read the definition of circular economy for me. Please, Franco. Urban mining is the set of processes and activities related to the production of secondary raw materials from urban solid waste. Secondary raw materials are not primary raw materials. Those come from mineral sources. So we need secondary raw materials. In other words, we cannot live with this extractivism that we have right now, which prevails. Unfortunately, it's the main one. I've chosen 5 examples that we do in our research group at the School of Engineering here. Batteries, for instance. We've used batteries for many years to store energy, but the tendency is batteries will be important to eliminate carbon. Most carbon elimination processes to release carbon require alternative sources, and those sources have to be stored somewhere. The best place to store them is in batteries, and batteries have evolved over the last 20 years, and they have become smaller and smaller and more portable. Mobile phones used to be bigger, heavier, thicker, not because of the technology, but because of the size of the battery, the amount of power that we can store in a device. So cars, for instance. In the previous slide, we saw a different technology where we were going to start using more and more electric cars. We used to have a few hybrid cars, but now we'll start using more and more electric vehicles, even in Brazil. So this is an electric vehicle. There are 150 to 200 kilograms worth of batteries on the floor, and that will give you an autonomy of 600 kilometers without having to recharge it. Most electric vehicles can go for 300 kilometers. It takes 6 minutes to charge the battery at a charging station, and it can drive for 300 kilometers. But there are prototypes of electric vehicles that can go up to 1,000 kilometers. And obviously, that drives up the demand for different materials. This is lithium. I talked about water shortage in São Paulo. As you can see on this chart, by 2030, there will be no lithium in the world for electric vehicles or portable devices that use the same kind of batteries. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. So what can we do about this material, which is very different for decarbonization? Only through recycling. And currently, there is no recycling process that can recycle this without significant emissions. So there's no point in replacing everything by electric power and having the same level of emissions as you did with fossil fuels. The idea is to be able to do it without the same level of emissions as fossil fuel. This should be the project we did at the School of Engineering. Is that it, Franco? Yes. So we've been implementing this project for 3 years through a partnership with a Brazilian company. So we have conceived a way to recycle this kind of battery. Franco is going to show you a battery. So inside this recipient, there is a battery that can be used in a car. That's a kilogram or half a kilogram, right? So a car takes 150 to 200 kilograms of the same battery or any other kind of device. So as you can see, we conceived the process. We started 3.5 years ago, and now we can separate each one of these materials. You're going to see some cobalt oxalate, the pink one. Franco is going to pass it around, and the green one, which is nickel carbonate. So from a car battery, you can get all these different compounds, which can then be reused in a new battery. So this is what we call urban mining and circular economy. These are printed circuit boards. Practically everything has one of these. Even cars, there's an onboard computer. These are the hearts of our computers and our mobile phones. They're not the hearts of cars yet, but printed circuit boards one day will be more important than an engine in a car, especially when we start using electric engines. So this is where we're going to control most things. When we talk about smart cities, all of that requires printed circuit boards. And printed circuit boards are complex materials. They're made up of lots of layers. Just like the battery I showed you, lots of layers. All of these materials are polylayers, incredible as it may seem. Sometimes they're more complex than the actual ore that we have taken from it. Is it up on the screen yet? So this is the demand for electronic materials and waste generation. So the demand is going up, and they are becoming obsolete faster and faster. So we're scrapping a lot more of these materials, and some of them are critical materials. They're hard to find, and they are required, such as lithium. So we need to find a way to recover that kind of material so we can reuse it. Otherwise, we're just going to be endlessly using up the resources. Different to battery recycling, of which there are few in the world, there are some in these countries to recover these metals, but none of them are zero emission. So we do recycle printed circuit boards, but there are emissions involved. We've developed many processes here. We've got some patents. Researchers that have published the highest number of papers in the world are from our School of Engineering. And for printed circuit boards as well, we have published the largest number of papers in knowledge creation. So this is some of what we do. We started researching this about 30 years ago. It's one of our oldest lines of research. The first award we got, in fact, was in '94. We got an award in the US to recycle this type of material. We were visionaries back then. Now there are some processes around the world, but for some of these items, we don't have anything, even in Brazil. LED. LED. All the lights we see in our devices or even at home are all LED. So the demand for LED has been growing, and they are made up of very rare materials. Rare earth compounds, for instance. These come from the bottom items of the periodic tables. As the name says, they're rare. They're rare earth materials. We have plenty of those in Brazil, but we don't really explore them. China is the main rare earth materials producer in the world. The world depends on China for them. It's a very strategic and critical material because we're dependent on one single country to get them, unless we develop recycling processes. So at our School of Engineering, we have developed a recycling process to recycle light bulbs, LED bulbs, so we can remove gallium in the form of oxide and yttrium in the form of oxide as well. And we did all of that at the School of Engineering. The last but one is LCD screens. My computer screen or our mobile phone screens. We used to have cathode tube screens. Remember them? They used to be huge. LCD screens are much thinner, more compact, more elegant, more efficient. They save more power. And obviously, they are more complex, and they also depend on the supply of a liquid crystal. It's a polymer, but there's a semiconductor that holds it together, indium and pewter. Sometimes I get it mixed up with yttrium. So there are many layers. The front part is glass, so you recycle glass, but there's silver, there's indium, actually not silver. No, actually silver is in the solar panels. So these are the processes around the world. None of them are 100% eco-efficient, so we still need some technologies. This is the process that we developed here at the school. And we can get indium oxide through that. And lastly, I'm not going to touch on every single electronic waste and technological waste that we create in our everyday lives. I'm going to talk about solar panels, photovoltaic panels. So to decarbonize, we tend to replace parts of our power supply, or close to 100%, by photovoltaic cells. We have a major project here at the University of São Paulo to replace a large part of our power by photovoltaic cells. We have a 4th generation panel. So just like the batteries I mentioned, which used to be huge and they're becoming smaller and smaller, and same applies to LCD panels. technology is developed and it changes over time, and it becomes easier to recycle, and they're using increasingly more critical materials. So, complex materials. The yellow dot on the right-hand side, or actually your left-hand side, says that we're going to have a demand of 8 million. We're going to generate 8 million of electronic waste, and by 2030 it's going to be 700 million. So it's going to grow by 100 times after 2030 because there will be an increase in demand, and decarbonization goals will require this kind of material, and it's not endless. So there will be a huge amount of scrap that needs to be treated, because if we don't treat it, it's like that guy I showed you that was drowning in technological waste.
And with materials that we don't have supply for them in the whole world. Again, the processes around the world. And this is the process that we developed here at Escola Polytechnica. All our processes are duly patented. And to not talk about all the materials that are available for technology, I will stop here and thank you for your attention. All the best to all of you.
Bem, vi que o Juan.
I saw that Juan-Samaniego arrived, so welcome. I already introduced myself. I am Tadeu Malheiros. I am an engineer by formation. I'm an ethno-engineer because I work more with interfaces of engineering with social areas. I work with research and teach in the Public Health College of the University of São Paulo. And part of the time, I also work in the environmental management superintendents together with the leaders of this area. And I also participate with some of the colleagues from Green Metric. Having said this, first, I would like to thank for this opening by Professor Tenório, and I would like to call to compose the panel in the following order. First, our colleague Thalita Dalbelo, who works within the Sustainability Office, and I will offer a few minutes for each of them to introduce themselves. But she's from UNICAMP. So Thalita, welcome, and please join us here. Also, our colleague Jackeline Martinez Gomes, who was awarded today. So also welcome the professor at the University of Trier. Professor Juan-Manuel Samaniego, University of Technology of Loja. He just arrived. There was a delay in his flight. And São Paulo is quite a hectic location. The airport seems close, but it is quite tedious to get here from the international airport. And also our colleague Rafael Telo, Vice President of Ambipar. Jackeline, Thalita, Tenório, and myself We are from this more academic environment, but we think that this dialogue is important. And Rafael is also helping to bring this discussion about circular economy and climate changes. And it's important for us to do our homework, but this depends on the dialogue with other key stakeholders. So as a partner, Ambipar is very important in this discussion. I will also take my seat in the panel so that we can discuss this, and we have a bit more than an hour. I will ask some questions to our colleagues, but also I would like to open to questions from the floor and also comments from the floor. So I think it's important for us to have a very involving discussion. Thank you to all of you.
Bem, eu vou começar.
I will start then by asking a question to the academia colleagues. Before starting, maybe starting with Thalita, maybe you could talk for 2 minutes about what you do within the university so that everyone gets to know you and also strengthen our networking. More and more we'll need to know what other colleagues are doing, so it's important maybe to share. So let's start with Jackeline, then Juan. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here at this event. I am an urbanist architect. I graduated from UNICAMP. I did my master's and PhD there. And today I am a sustainability coordinator. I am an employee, not a professor. That's it. And I always worked with sustainability. My master's degree was in industrial ecology, and my PhD was in urban planning. So I think I can contribute significantly to this discussion. Thank you. Good afternoon. I can only speak Portuñol, but I think you can understand. Jackeline Martinez is my name. I am an environmental engineer, and I work with material flows. I worked for 20 years in the environmental campus at the Applied Sciences campus, and I work with projects, applied projects and research projects for universities, cities, and industries involving circular economy and material flows.
I think my first word is to apologize for all of you. Thank you for your patience. It's true that my flight was delayed and the traffic, it was heavy to the hotel, to the USP. I am an economist. Nobody's perfect. But I did a PhD in UNAM, in Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, and PhD in Economic of Natural Resource and Sustainable Development. In this moment, I work in the UTPL. It's the big university online in Ecuador, and work in the direction of quality. That direction has the responsibility to make or to transform or use the information from different rankings in Ecuador and in the world. Thank you so much, and again, my apologies.
Boa tarde, pessoal.
Good afternoon. Just a correction. I am not Rafael. I am Plinio. Rafael should be here, but he got caught up in a trip. The second disclaimer is that please go on the trip to Ilhabela. It's one of the most beautiful places in Brazil, and I say this because I chose to live there 5 years ago. So I'm going there tonight, and I urge you to really get to learn about this place. Rafael is the sustainability president, and I am the decarbonization leader at the company. Before Ambipar, I founded a company 18 years ago, which is the greatest carbon project developer regarding the conservation and restoration of forests. So we have the largest project for the Atlantic forest here in the state of São Paulo. We interact a lot with academia, and I am an entrepreneur in the environment, but I also work with nature-based solutions. I graduated in business administration, and I also got a master's in public policies from the University of Colombia. Sorry, Plinio. Very well. First, I will ask a question to Thalita. Knowing about the history of UNICAMP and knowing that it is a large university, it's a large public university with many challenges, but I know that you are already implementing some circularity projects. First, I would like to talk about the context of the university campus. So, what are we doing inside the campus? And later, we can expand our discussion. And of course, we will not solve things on a campus scale because we need to dialogue outside of the campus. But first, what are we doing within UNICAMP that you think is working in terms of circularity, and how far can we go depending on us? There is also an issue involving interfaces with teaching, but in campus management, could you talk about this? I always start from the principle that a university is a mini city. It is an urban location, and we have around 40,000 people in our campus in Barão Geraldo, our main campus. Thinking of infrastructure, to manage the campus itself, we have some areas of activity. We work with energy, water, waste, and part of this focuses on research and development and applying this in campus management. Energy is an area that we are quite advanced. We have a lot of PV energy. We just inaugurated a mini grid, the campus grid, which is using natural gas together with electric power to maintain the safety of the electric system within the campus. So these things are already underway. We have our waste programs, hazardous waste, recyclable waste. And I think that our main challenge here is to integrate all of this. These silos, they have their inputs and outputs in separate ways. They don't integrate with one another. So the works in energy stay in energy. The examples that we get from this system, we are not able to use this as inputs within the university itself. The university cannot resolve its circularity, so we outsource this. So our recyclable waste is sent to cooperatives. We don't have our own recycling. Our common waste goes to a landfill. We have small composting. It's very small. So we need to really tie all of this in so that we can establish the circularity within the university and within these silos that occupy the university management. So that's what I think about that. Excellent. Jackeline. How is this challenge of implementing circularity at a campus scale there in the context of Germany within the European Union guidelines? This is probably different from the Latin American context for sure. We started more than 20 years ago working with sustainability at our campus. I will talk about the campus later. I'll address the question. We have a supply of heat and power that is 100% renewable source based. So we have PV energy. We use solar thermal energy. We use organic waste to generate biogas. In a cogeneration plant, we transform this into electric and thermal power that we consume in our campus. So all the energy consumed in the campus comes from renewable sources. We also have programs to reduce solid waste. The best waste is the waste we don't generate. And we also have programs and a strategy for circular economy on campus that is adapted to the plans of the European Union and of German. So we segregate all different waste fractions, and we have communication strategies for students. Now we have the circular economy strategy to improve this. So we have days in which we repair equipment or to exchange materials so that not everything goes to waste, and we can reuse part of this. This has to do with solid waste in general, and other materials like plastic is in agreement with the green dot. So we reuse plastic and packaging. This is segregated on campus, and then it is submitted to treatment to generate secondary materials that can be used once again in the industry. We also have a water strategy. The first option is to consume intelligently, to reduce water consumption, qualify people so that they can consume less water, and we have reuse systems for rainwater for bathroom discharges, and we have infiltration areas so that not everything goes to water sources, and we are connected to the sewage treatment, and we have in our buildings a system to generate zero residual water, to reuse this residual water. Our campus is fully aligned with the German and European Union strategies, and we are as if a laboratory, a real laboratory, an innovation laboratory, and a technology laboratory. We tell our students that we need to think of carbon neutrality and circular economy. And we have been implementing all these strategies in our campus. In our institute, we help cities and industries, and we say, okay, we're not talking about things that are not real. You can come to our campus and see that some things work and others could be improved. So this is a real laboratory, and we have energy efficiency systems with LED lamps and using passive verification. And the idea is to have several strategies to show to all our stakeholders everything we do. And if you wish to visit our campus, I kindly invite all of you to visit. Thank you, Jackeline. Juan, can I speak in Portuguese? Or
I think I prefer to speak in this dialect. It was the Spanish dialect from Portuguese. I use Spanish better for me. But if, I don't have problem. But I think it's better for me to Spanish. Okay. But the audience I think it's better to speak in English.
Okay.
Spanish.
Muy bien. La pregunta.
Very good. The question is, in the context of Ecuador, what is the relationship with the local government regarding projects of sustainable development linked to the university? Do you think that there is a large problem because part of the waste and other issues that involve circularity depend on the government? So how is the government in your context?
To use English in this case because it's a part of the public policy. It's not that the circular economy. The problem in Ecuador is the general problem in Latin America. God is in all parts of Ecuador, but they live in Quito, in the capital of Ecuador. The problem is most centralized decisions to public policy that don't go to the local government. In this case, we have implemented a comprehensive recycling and composting programs with the local governments, but the environmental ministry in Quito has a lot of problems to make the different actions and normative to approach and to take the opportunity to circular economy in Ecuador. Only after 2 years ago, we have the white book of circular economy in Ecuador, only 2 years ago. In this year, we have the first book of bioeconomy in Ecuador, the white book of bioeconomy in Ecuador. And that is the problem, the public policy and relationships with the actors, the civil society, universities, research institutes, it's not strong. That is the problem.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. Plinio, you mentioned about your background and your activities with decarbonization. How do you see, within the context of decarbonization, the action of circular economy and the context that we live in Brazil, mainly thinking of this interface with universities, government, and companies? There is a debate of what falls under what, if decarbonization is inside circular economy or if circular economy is in decarbonization. I work more with decarbonization, but theoretically, I understand decarbonization as part of the circular economy. By the end of the day, this is the value proposition that we have for our clients. Usually they're companies. CO2, carbon dioxide, is a waste. The great difference is that it is difficult to measure. We don't see, we can't smell, but we can measure, we can smell, we can measure, and we can reduce. When we look at the reduction, you have two dominating factors. You can reduce by energy, and in line with what Professor Tenório shared, we have the fossil fuel issue. How do you replace fossil fuels by renewable fuels? This is probably the most complex economic battle of mankind or humankind. We are going to the 30th edition of COP, and last year's COP, we as a global society were able to end. And it's not a true end, it's a phase out of fossil fuels. And this COP did away with this topic. Another important piece of information is that despite the growth of subsidies from governments for renewable energy, the growth was incredible, but it is significantly lower than the incentives for the fossil fuel industry. So we are already at 1.5 degrees. 2024 is 1.5 degrees. It's not that we're going to get there. We already are there. But with this opening, I understand decarbonization as part of the circular economy. For you to reduce carbon, this is a personal belief of mine. Maybe I have a conflict of interest since I represent a company, but I don't see this being done with a strong presence of the private sector. There's an issue involving financing. We have a huge fiscal issue around the world. Brazil is also high up there. So we don't have reserves to invest in the technology that is required. But the government can direction subsidies. But we also can use solutions based on nature. Brazil and some Latin American countries also have this, but most countries don't have this. Our emissions do not come from fossil fuels, but rather they come from the use of land. So if you use land well, you can sequester carbon, both on land and at sea, as we will see in Ilhabela. So this is the great possibility and the bet of Brazil faced with this challenge of decarbonization. Based on nature-based solutions, we can do this. Next year, we'll have the COP of Nature. The last 3 editions, they were in countries of high carbon emissions. And to finish the answer, this morning, this is the first time that I say this publicly. I've been working 16 years for this, but now the law of the regulated carbon market was sanctioned. Since 2009, I've been working with this. And there they foresaw the market to reduce carbon. Now we have a law that has huge regulation, and this is where the opportunity and the dangers lie. There will be a great lobby on behalf of industries who do not want to incorporate this cost. But here, academia and civil society have a very important role to help in this regulation and demonstrate what is purely economic lobbying or what is a policy that gives financial instruments for us to reach our NDCs, our goals for decarbonization based on the Climate Convention. Thank you, Plínio. We will need a microphone for Miguel. I will ask a question to Professor Tenório, and I would like to provoke a point here. You mentioned 4 points regarding batteries, the printed circuit boards, the LED screens, and PV panels. Here at USP, we have some programs that are well underway. For example, with electronic devices to recycle these materials. PV panels, I think this is something new within the context. Maybe we don't have anything significant. I'm thinking about USP right now. Maybe we don't have a great volume, but in upcoming years, as you showed yourself, some of these types of waste will create greater volumes. My question is, in terms of planning our universities, how should we think about what we can manage and create this circularity within our campus, and what will we require in terms of partnerships with other stakeholders, whether the local government or companies like Plinio is bringing to be able to work. Sometimes you showed several researches, but to place this in the market, partly we depend on government and partly we depend on the private sector to work. Or maybe the university can resolve this in-house. Based on your experience, how can we think the role of the university beyond research, and how can it manage its campus?
Wow. Okay. I was sitting here quietly, but now, I'm going to have to answer you. I'm an engineer. If you said nobody's perfect because they're an economist, I mean, engineers are usually the worst. When a university thinks about decreasing carbon emissions or becoming carbon neutral, you need to sit down at the table with a lot of people who think differently to how I think. And they're right. I'm not saying I'm not right, but I only see one side of the issue. So my answer to you is going to be from that perspective, from one side of the issue. So touching on what you said and then expanding it, elaborating on it. Decarbonization, as I tried to show in my presentation, involves changing power sources, and I'm going to quote somebody. There was the Stone Age, we still have stones, and we're going to move away from the fossil fuel age, but fossil fuels will continue to be around. We need to deal with the fact that technology has a cost. As time goes by, that cost goes down, but things become more sophisticated. We have to be able to store energy, so we need to move away from fossil fuels to a different kind of fuel. So, as I said, there's no point in replacing one system with another and just creating more waste. We have to do the other side of the issue. What are we going to do with the waste we're going to create through decarbonization or by reducing our carbon footprint? That's the perspective I'm coming from. What I think we should do about waste is university has to create knowledge and not deal with the waste. We don't need to have a CEDIR. We don't have to have a recycling business here. We just need to collect it. We need to have different collection models and create partnerships with people who will dispose of that waste, deal with that waste. If we don't have a way of doing that in Brazil, then we need to develop a way of doing it in Brazil. We can't just say, oh, we have 100 million solar panels and batteries, and we don't know what to do about it, so we're just going to put it away somewhere or deal with it with the best solution. No, we need to have the right solution and not just the best available. We have to conceive a solution that will deal with the problem. That's the role of universities, and then it should share that technology with companies. We should create the knowledge, and by creating the knowledge, we will drive development in the country. We'll improve the quality of life, we'll create jobs, we'll decrease inequality. Those are the results of creating knowledge and technology, or they should be anyway. So I believe we should have partnerships with companies that will allow us to develop those technologies, which is what we do at the University of São Paulo, and not just creating centers for doing this or that at the university. Maybe we can do a little bit of that. As the colleague from the University of Campinas said, have a composting system, you know, sorting out our waste. Also, creating environmental education models and that will help us reduce our carbon footprint, sharing best practices with the population, but applying that to the university, you know, decreasing the use of cars in the campus, and now moving out of the campus, requiring that our suppliers use as little fossil fuel as possible in their production systems. The university has to demand that. The university should be buying recycled paper, and it doesn't. That's the kind of thing it should do. Changing the mobility standards within the campus. You know, people shouldn't be driving or driving as little as possible in here. The problem is that if we have bikes available here at the university, we're going to have security. We're going to have security to look after those bicycles. And we need to demand from our suppliers that they do the same, even if we have to pay more for it. Buying power, the university is already doing that. Buying power will generate part of that power here through photovoltaic cells, but we need to buy the rest. From whom? From people who generate power and who are carbon neutral. The university is already doing that. But that's just a model for power. We can use it for other things. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I see things. Yeah, that was the question. We need to find a way forward, or the ways forward. But you touched on an important point. The University of São Paulo alone includes 100,000 people. So it's a mid-sized town. If we bring our universities together, if we add up public universities in the state of São Paulo alone, that number would double, 200,000 people. If we bring other towns together to create the green metric network, as Professor Jornaidy showed, you know, there are 400, 500 universities. I really think we can affect major changes. It's like you said, if we're buying something and we demand reverse logistics and different sustainability criteria, you know, even in construction, exactly in construction, we can develop the technology, but as users, we would be able to demand those things from our suppliers. In services, products, I think it's very important that we do. It's also a challenge. Maybe our universities should start taking the first steps towards doing that. And obviously, we need to train our procurement departments, you know, when they're hiring services or buying products. But that was my question. So now I think we'll open the floor for questions. We have time for 2 or 3 questions, and then we can answer them.
Back here for the discussion. Come on.
Pode ser, tá ligado? Boa tarde a todos, obrigada pelas...
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your words and for answering Professor Tadeu's questions. I've got some food for thought and some comments for you. I see that some stakeholders see circular economy as a closed loop only. And yes, it is one of the basis for the concept. But I think the concept itself can limit the use of the concept. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I think some people believe it's difficult to apply the circular economy concept precisely because of the closed loop concept. And I know that sometimes it's not a fully closed loop. It can be open in one town and closed in another town. And I think that can limit its use, whether it be to put it into practice or as a concept. I don't know if my question is clear. I just wanted us to reflect on that concept. So my question is to all members of the panel. Okay, everybody's shy. Okay, we have a question. I have a question to the economist. What do you think is the difference between circular economy and ecological economy? I also want to answer the previous question, if that's okay, because I think they go hand in hand. Yes, the definition of the concepts, to land them and to bring them into reality makes them a bit more complicated. But I think it's crucial to think about the concept of circular economy, which should be based on an intelligent design of goods and services. It's not just about breaking with linear economy, of extractivism. We need to extract wisdom and knowledge. So it's a commitment. It's a commitment to much more than just a concept, which is also necessary, but we need to have a step-by-step process, and we need to have a smart design for things. So we repair, recycle, reuse, and yes, the closed loop is part of it, but we need to know how to use what we have intelligently. And there is the difference between the ecological economy and, well, the border between ecological economy and circular economy. I mean, we economists like to make things more complicated. So, differences. One, in ecological economy, we don't necessarily create things for all markets. Neoclassical economy and environmental economy generates everything for all markets. Circular economy takes needs into consideration, but it also applies certain concepts of a new theory, which is degrowth. So how much do we need to degrow, decrease? Because that could have an impact in the mid to the long term. It's key that circular economy borrows the concept of strong sustainability when we talk about non-renewable natural resources. We cannot continue with the same demand and consumption of fossil fuels because that doesn't make sense. Climate change is not it's not just a story, a myth, it's the reality. A few weeks ago, we published a paper that says that every time the GDP goes up, so do the tons of CO2. There's a direct relationship between the two things. And we are quite a large oil-producing country. So we need to apply strict sustainability. We have to invest in research. And obviously, we can't stop consuming. The objective is to find the balance, to strike a balance, to have the wisdom when applying science and technology. It's very hard to talk about pilot projects in Brazil because it's such a huge country. It's the size of a continent. But in our case, at the Loja University in Ecuador, what's worked for us has been to implement small circular economy pilot projects, checking the installed capacity, and that will allow you to grow with the community, for instance. That kind of thing. About circularity. We always start from the premise that the maths has to work, and it's never going to work because we won't be able to turn all kinds of waste from all kinds of processes into something to be used in other processes. There will always be some waste. I'm doing my best to put an end to that. Closed loop, yeah, that's a closed loop, yeah. I was just going to say to him, he has extracted all chemical components from a light bulb. What was left? Was there anything left? Or are you able to extract everything? Well, what I shared with you was a battery. Yeah, we do it for TV, we do it for everything. Right now we can extract 90% of what's in a battery. It's in these containers. I wanted to show you because it's a reality. It's not just a flow chart. We haven't been able to extract 10% of what's in a battery, but we have to be able to do it. We have to. That's the point. We have to have a very strict goal, and we have to get there. I understand. I know what you mean when you say it's not possible. I'm the engineer. I should be the first one to say it's not possible. But we have to try. We have to try. Because that's the ideal solution. To make all processes from the extraction processes at mines, that has to be sustainable, their use has to be sustainable all the way through to the other end. If you're talking about a linear chain, we need to know each part of the process. And it's tough, you know, being aware of every part of the process. Because processes are difficult, but we won't have lithium to produce batteries for everything. Cobalt, I think I skipped that slide. I skipped a few. Cobalt. We depend on a specific country. I won't name the country because I don't want to discriminate against anybody. It's a country in Africa. They are the biggest cobalt suppliers in the world. No, the world depends on Brazil for niobium. If we don't find the way to recycle things, we won't be able to grow. There is no way out. Okay? Thank you, Professor. You talked about niobium. We have an expert. His PhD was on niobium, actually. And he talked about the social aspects and the impacts of niobium extraction, which is probably another challenge of those processes. So the more we reduce the demand for mining, the better. But at the same time, in the process of circular economy, we need to think about extraction and the reuse of that material, especially with people who collect waste, co-ops. I've been reading articles about people who are melting cables to use their components to sell them. So the next question is for Plinio. When it comes to emissions, if when we buy something, it could say what its carbon footprint is, what the carbon emissions were to produce that product. And the freight forwarders could also tell the consumer what their footprint was to transport that product. So when I buy a product, I could buy the product with the lowest carbon emissions. Will we ever get to that point? Well, from a technological point of view, we're already there. Some apps can scan a QR code and it will tell you exactly what it was. So we have the technology. It's, you know, an approximate number. I don't think it has to be 100% accurate, because to do that, we have to deal with Scope 3 products and services. If you're not familiar with the emissions calculations, there's Scope 1, which are activities directly related to produce that good. Scope 2 is the power that was used to produce that good. And Scope 3 is the supply chain, upstream and downstream. The challenge of public policies and everything else is Scope 3, you know, fossil fuel, when it comes out of an oil well. The company will say, well, Scope 1 was the energy I used to extract it, and then when consumers filled up their tank, then whose energy do we count? The producing company or the drivers? That's the main political debate right now. Where does the buck stop? But when it comes to products and services, we have our own app called Ambipar. Any consumer can register and it will give you the calculations, approximate calculations of eating a sandwich, drinking a cup of coffee, and you can offset that if you want. And just as an aside, what does offsetting that mean? Because in academia, we think we can offset everything. If we were able to offset everything, we wouldn't have a problem to begin with. But offsetting that is important because it makes activities possible that cannot be financed. So planting trees is a classic example. So you can plant a tree, it has to grow. More than half of this weight is carbon. If you burn it, it will be CO2. So planting is not economically feasible. I mean, we've destroyed so many millions of hectares this year, more than 1 million hectares of deforestation in the last year alone. So there's a cost to that. And the offset market is a B2B market. It doesn't include consumers. I think the companies are more responsible for reducing their carbon footprint. I think consumers are, you know, obviously when they're buying something, they could make a choice, but major companies should be more exposed to those regulations. So that's what offsetting means. You should be able to, at least part of those emissions, the hard to abate emissions, should be offset by activities that are reducing, or there's carbon sequestration elsewhere. So you're basically financing some climate actions. That's the concept. Jackeline. I've been hearing about, I mean, in theory, we would expect to see that information on product labels. So in Germany, you know, things tend to be a bit better organized. Does the university have a policy to buy products considering carbon emissions? And, you know, buying and then using products, is that information clear? Because there are more and more products available in the market, but you can't trace them. They're coming from somewhere else. There's no information available. Prices are very low. You know, with Brazilian legislation, the law includes some sustainability aspects to be included, but price is still a factor. What is it like in Germany at your university? Yes, the strategy at our university is to have circular economy and sustainable procurement. So all the products we buy have to be environmentally friendly, they have to be sustainable, and we have a sustainability report as well that monitors all of those elements. In Europe, the objective is for Europe to become carbon neutral by 2050. So that's why they created the Green Deal, which is the agenda for sustainable growth. No action blocks in the Green Deal is one of them is the action plan for circular economy. So the idea is to have sustainable initiatives across all the production cycle. So the idea is to consider a product's full production cycle. So you can start an eco-design that will guarantee circularity. So how to get a product based on an eco-design that will allow it to be used again in the cycle. So our university is creating those strategies to contribute to sustainable development and growth. Okay. Have we got any more questions from the audience? Can you help me out, please? We have a couple of questions. Good afternoon. My question is to Tenório. I don't know if I got it right, but from what he said, he thinks the role of universities should be to create technology so companies can do the recovery. But, you know, often we want to have circularity, but there aren't any companies in the market using it. So shouldn't we talk to the public sector, to the government to foster use, to ask for help so that these companies can do that? I saw his technology, but we're looking for a company to recycle our photovoltaic panels, and we can't find any. I have some mercury waste, and I can't find a company that will do it. They want to put concrete. They want to put the mercury into concrete and then put that in a landfill. That's what they've offered to do. Yet there are no options available in the market, so we have to store it before the economy advances and comes up with a solution. What can we do? What can we do about that? Well, I don't know if I answered the first question, which is about the closed loop not really being a closed loop. So I'll answer that before I forget that one. See, I forgot. I'm joking. The role of universities is to generate knowledge. And knowledge can then be turned into technology or not. But I think that's the main role of universities, to generate knowledge, to provide capacity building to human resources. It's one of the things universities should do, to generate knowledge, world-class knowledge. That's what public universities should do. That's what our university aims to do. If you look at our motto in Latin, it says science wins. I didn't make that up, that was there before I was even born. It's on our coat of arms. So that's one of the things we need to do. We need to win through science. Society needs to win through science. Our role is to generate knowledge. And in my case, specifically, knowledge becomes technology. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it can lead to public policies or indicators, which is what Tadeu does. Everyone's knowledge is used for different things. So we generate knowledge, which can lead to patents, to papers that will be given to somebody, and it will be turned into technology. And we know that's the consequence of science.
How do we do this in a country that doesn't have this? That's your question, right? We weren't born in a different country. We were born in Brazil. We're here. And we started to work with electronic scrap 30 years ago. And we were acknowledged outside of Brazil, and here, until now, we have collection systems and pickers, but most of our electronic waste goes outside of Brazil. It's not just mercury. We have a lot of technology, but we contribute with this science that someone around the world uses, because science is public. It needs to be public. We are a university. We defend public knowledge. And of course, we also have financing for some things, not 100% though. So how do we do this in Brazil if we don't have this? How can the university contribute towards this? We contribute generating knowledge here and not having to bring this knowledge from elsewhere. This knowledge and technology becomes available, and we depend on many other factors. For example, public policies. If there are no public policies for recycling, nobody will develop recycling. Some other countries have recycling because they have a public policy, not because they're prone to that. This is a requirement from society. So society influences on this. So the knowledge that I generate from universities and public universities, they generate this. All universities generate this. And this generates public policies that generates from demands coming from society. So we act in several fronts to further develop the country. So this is our role. But there are things we don't do in Brazil. In Brazil, we don't make cars, but we make airplanes. So these are things characteristic to Brazil. And we don't have electronic device recyclers in Brazil. We don't have battery recyclers in Brazil. Everything that I mentioned, I think we don't have anyone doing this in Brazil. We have cooperatives that send this abroad. We need to develop this. Our country needs to develop in several aspects. And one of the development aspects is this. Universities not buying from those that emit. That forces the market. And society holds this power. So society generates demands. If society does not want to burn fossil fuels anymore, it won't. if it wants, it will continue to do so. So university shows a series of things. We have a series of specialists here at USP, UNICAMP regarding climate change, and several people working with indicators and things of this sort. So the university moves society by means of knowledge. But since I talked about knowledge in a more holistic way, I think everyone here could talk a little bit about this. Thank you, Tenório. Thalita asked to say something? No. Okay. Please, Professor. I would like to also make a comment. I didn't lead the panel. You can see that my voice is a bit complicated today. But this focus that Tenório mentioned is what we try doing in the university. We started with the program USP Sustentabilidade to influence public policies. This brought incredible results. I will give you two examples. One from Nina involving bioeconomy, work in the Vale do Ribeira area involving agriculture, and the other one involving the use of effluents in agriculture, together with Professor Tamara, that generated a guide for the Secretary of Agriculture. So the university surpassed that level of just developing science and research from a theoretical standpoint to provide that knowledge, to, in fact, influence on public policies. Since I was a manager and the Secretary of the Environment and also president of CETESB, we notice how important this connection is with the academia. Oftentimes, what is being produced here can be used, or we can also influence it. And here we have something regarding the partnership of USP Proclima with Ambipar. So, for example, for the recycling of electronic devices, they just inaugurated a plant to recycle electronic devices, and there are a series of things being worked on. So I see that we change the level to influence and connect much more strongly with the private sector. And in this sense, this also brings new depth to the university. I see sometimes students looking for a topic to study, and they don't know what to focus or study. And they could be working with something to facilitate concrete solutions. And sometimes they're just in the theoretical dimension. So I see a huge opportunity of us more and more making these connections to bring this knowledge from the private sector and vice versa, because those in the front, they have knowledge that oftentimes that we, just looking at science, will not have. And the inverse is also true. So this is sharing that is very healthy, in my opinion. Very good what Patricia mentioned. In fact, we inaugurated 2 weeks ago the largest electronic device demobilization plant in São José dos Campos. And it's not as beautiful as Ilha Bela, but it's on the way there. So it's a beautiful line. It's huge. Imagine a car or refrigerator factory the other way around. So the refrigerator enters the production line, and then you have a series of pots with different minerals in the end of the production line. So Marcelo, our colleague, he runs this. My comment of the relationship between academia and the private sector, and I haven't really focused on this. This is more based on experience. I studied in the U.S. What I see that works is creating environments for innovation with startups. This is a solution that is not complex. It has much more to do with engagement. But if we create an environment where students can see themselves besides an academic. They will also see a path forward in entrepreneuring in that technology that they are studying, and what are the economic models that incentivize this. So this has much more to do with the sponsorship of entrepreneurship and this environment of innovation and startups. This is not a criticism, but in our country, at least, when we compare this to international experience, there's a lot that we can learn to bring economic development, as Professor Tenório mentioned. Thank you, Plinio. I think we are already headed to our wrap-up, but we have a last question from our colleague from Facengs, and after that, we will then conclude. Good afternoon. Congratulations for the panel. A very important discussion and very interesting. I would just like to make a comment for the panel. Professor Thalita, maybe you could build on this. There's a point that drew my attention. When we think of the issue of circularity, we see the private sector taking an interesting route, universities building their role, but thing that concerns me a lot is the circularity of cities, many Brazilian cities. So when we think of the rates, the reuse rates, it's very low in cities compared to other countries. It's Plinio, right? You mentioned the refrigerators. If these refrigerators do not make their way to the industry to be disassembled and reuse them, we will not be able to develop this chain. So for the panel, how can we also build together with political entities which are the agents of the eyes of these cities to also build this transition to a different climate model and to also have different circularity? So this is the question I would like to raise for you. And whoever feels at ease to contribute, that's great. Sometimes I have students who are city representatives, and they mention this barrier. Something that I faced recently, we have a startup that we are helping from a former student from Facengs, and we don't find mechanisms for them to have a business model with city halls because there are the public bidding processes, and there are many limitations in this. So we still face these barriers to make this more widespread and have a more easygoing transition for this. Thank you. I can start, and later I'll ask my colleagues for help because there are many questions or points within your point. I would like to start talking about documentation. It's important to recall that here in Brazil, public purchases are done by bids. So that's how things are purchased. In Brazil, we have a new purchasing law, which has a series of articles that specify sustainable public purchases. At a federal level, federal universities are obligated to present a sustainable logistics program, the so-called PLS. This existed in a framework from 2013, and then it was updated this year. We launched our PLS this 1 month before the model changed. So we are still using the old model, but there are a series of indicators on how sustainable public procurement should occur in several areas: energy, water, construction materials. And the PLS determines reverse logistics. So when procuring by means of new bids, in the public sector the full process. So we need to consider the purchase, considering the supplier that offers more sustainable services, and the return of this material or this product to the market by means of reverse logistics. So we have this path that at universities we can follow, and this is a document that already exists, and we can and should follow. And we can also exert influence that universities normally can exert on the public sector, as Professor Patricia was mentioned, and Professor Tamara also already did this. So our power of influence as a university to influence decisions on public policies, in the case here of Brazil, but I think all countries fall under this condition. Thank you. It's already 4 p.m. I think we achieved the purpose of the panel. We wanted to debate issues involving circular economy, climate change, and also carbon, the role of universities, and the importance of discussing this with stakeholders, government, and companies, and also think where we are headed and what we can accelerate in this transition. Once again, I would like to thank Thalita, Jackeline, Tenório, Juan, and Felipe for your contribution in this discussion. And I believe we will progressively incorporate this also in our activities and planning. I would like to thank all of you who are with us, and next we will have a field visit. We will walk there. It's very close to here. It's a pleasant area. So let's meet outside, and from there we will provide the instructions. There's a watch charger that someone forgot. We will stow it, but if it's anyone's, just look for the organizers. I would also like to thank the IT department that offered their support throughout the event with all the recordings and all the material, and also the partnership with the UI Green metric, which also has motivated us significantly. And we have a lot of work ahead. If you are using a headset, a translation headset, on your way out, please leave it with a technician next to the translation booth. Okay, so congratulations to all of you. I would like to request that you go quickly to the vans so that we don't waste any time to get there. Professor Hilda will explain everything in English and will explain how the biodigesters work. And then we can conclude with a final catering event.